we spoke with a decent amount of people who, a lot of them said, oh, they wanted to see Democrats doing more of what Cory Booker did.
But what got me about that is it wasn't like Strom Thurmond trying to stop the civil rights legislation. Why didn't he do that to stop the appointment of Kennedy? God only knows what a disaster he's going to be. Why didn't he stop Hegseth becoming Department of Defense?
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Ashley with Status Coup News, and we are going to be talking about why the mass layoffs of federal workers actually might mean more than you think. And I'm really happy to be joined today by the great Les Leopold, a longtime labor organizer, co-founder and executive director of the Labor Institute, and author of seveles excellent books, like his latest Wall Street's War on Workers: How Mass Layoffs and Greed Are Destroying the Working Class and What to Do About It. So, Les, you and I spoke in February when these layoffs had first begun, and you said that these federal layoffs are a window into the entire layoff problem. So since then, close to 200,000 employees have been fired, accepted buyout offers, or are otherwise set for termination. And I think on its face, it can feel like these layoffs in particular are sort of happening in a silo. And they're a separate event from, let's say, a mass layoff event at a company like Alphabet, and something that like federal and public sector workers should be very concerned about, but workers in the private sector can kind of view from a distance, and, with a degree of security from. And I want to talk to you about why that might not actually be true. So can you talk to me about why we should all be very concerned about these layoffs, whether or not we are actually federal workers?
Yeah, I'd like to take us back about 40 years into the early 1980s. There was a transformation in thinking, basically a corporate cultural understanding of mass layoffs. Before that period, mass layoffs were viewed as a sign of management malfeasance. Yes, there were layoffs when there were recessions, but corporations never saw it as a positive thing to lay off workers during periods of economic growth. That seemed to be a violation of everything they stood for. But when high finance started to get deregulated in the early 1980s, there was a cultural shift forced by Wall Street, basically, that said, look, what matters is the price of your stock. And when I was doing research for my book, Wall Street's War on Workers, I came across a bunch of articles, Business Week and elsewhere, where corporate CEOs were embarrassed, ashamed that they were laying off people, but they felt forced to because pressure from the board now had Wall Street people on it who were demanding a higher return, and that return could only be created by cutting costs, and cutting costs meant laying off workers. What happened then is really interesting. Up until that point, the Democratic Party was the party against unemployment, against mass layoffs. And it was the protector of working people and their job, and basically job stability. That got thrown out the window. Both parties became advocates of Wall Street deregulation, and a whole slew of financial destabilization came in: mergers, acquisitions, leverage buyouts, many of which were paid for by laying off workers as soon as possible. And so now you had these superheroes of mass layoff artists. There was a whole Business Week issue that listed the greatest layoff people and how proud they were to lay off 30, 40, 50,000 people within their own firms. But the disturbing thing that happened was that all of us began to accept that mass layoffs in the private sector was just the way it was. There was nothing you could do about it. The blame was placed on automation. The blame was placed on globalization. The blame was placed on anything but corporate management and Wall Street. It was just the way business was conducted. And if you look at any of those claims more carefully, you can see that automation is a slow process. Mass layoffs are a fast process. And sometimes they're connected, but rarely. Actually, the mass layoffs are very connected to financial maneuvers. You want, especially something called stock buybacks, where before 1982, corporations were not permitted to use more than 2% of their own money to buy back their own shares, because that was considered stock manipulation. Because when you buy back your own shares and you make them go away, all the other shares are more valuable automatically, because the earnings per share is now spread over a smaller number of shares. So the deregulation of stock buybacks took place in 82. And today, almost 70 cents of every dollar in profits goes to stock buybacks instead of 2%. Now it's almost 70%. And to pay for those stock buybacks, mass layoffs often follow. So that understanding is necessary to realize the period we're in now. So now we see mass layoffs of the public sector. You can see the Democratic Party is all upset about this, and certainly the workers are upset, as they should be, and the unions which represent them. But it's viewed entirely differently than mass layoffs in the private sector. You said what, 300,000 so far and counting?
So far, it's been 200,000.
200,000. 1.5 million last month in the private sector. 1.5 million every month in the private sector. Every month, involuntary layoffs. So what you have is like a split screen, just like our screen right here. You have, on the one hand, you have tremendous upsetness with public sector layoffs, and then you have this nobody gives a damn about private sector layoffs. And that makes it very difficult for the workers in both sectors, even the unionized workers, to come around a common program, because they've never developed a program that would work for the private sector. It was ignored. And instead, what you saw, even at the best of the Democrats had to offer, was investment programs, tax incentives, things that. So the CHIPS program, for example, I looked at this sort of carefully. Intel got $8 billion to build a new CHIPS facility, I think, in New Mexico and Arizona, and was going to produce 2,000 new jobs. While they were getting that money, they laid off 2,000 workers elsewhere. So there's never been what I've been advocating for the last half a year is that any corporation that receives taxpayer money shall not subject its workers to involuntary layoffs. If you want to lay them off, you got to pay them. You have to entice them. It has to be voluntary. You can't force them out, and it's entirely doable. Of course, corporations don't want to do it, and the Democratic Party has lost their nerve to force the issue. They just accept it as the way it is, and so now you have this split screen, which should be a mass. Compare this to PATCO in 1982. I think it was 82.
It was 81, and that's actually I had wanted to ask you about this because when we spoke last time, we again in February, so at the very beginning of the layoffs, we had kind of compared this moment to PATCO and how that kind of set the stage and set a precedent for the way the next 40 years have gone for working people, essentially. So I think it's interesting to kind of talk about it now that we've had a little bit of time to digest everything that's been going on.
Well, you're forcing me to reflect back on it. I was at so PATCO, the air traffic controllers union, went on strike. The conditions were horrendous, tremendous stress, et cetera. And Reagan said, okay, you go out on strike, we're going to fire you and replace you. And he did. And there had been other public sector, it was illegal, that had been illegal. And usually they get settled with some fines on the union, but usually something gets worked out. And what Reagan was saying, it's now open season on unions. If they go on strike, feel free to replace them, which corporations weren't doing. This, again, was this era of we don't really want to, we'd like to avoid major fights with our unions. We'd like to keep production going. We'd like to develop the workforce. We don't want to keep laying them off. And we certainly don't want to get in a fight about pushing them out on strike and then replacing them with non-union workers. That seemed like a lot of work. Although it happened. There were large strikes even during this era. Lots of strikes, actually, but they usually got settled. Or they almost always got settled. So now you have a picture. So there was this huge 400,000 people on the mall. I was there. And there was a spirit at the union. The number of people in unions was twice the numbers as now. There was a feeling that a lot of the people there said, really wanted to go down to Reagan National Airport. It wasn't National Airport at that point, and just shut it down. Just go there and march in. This is pre-TSA, wouldn't have been that hard to shut it down. And people were ready to do that. But the leadership, Lane Kirkland, head of the AFL-CIO, basically said, they called it Solidarity Day in honor of the Polish workers, anti-communist Polish workers who were the Solidarity Union that was very active at the time. And the AFL-CIO was very anti-communist, so they supported it. So this was Solidarity Day. So Lane Kirkland gets up in front of 400,000 people and says, the next Solidarity Day is Election Day, 1982 midterms. So it was a very feeble response, but it was a response. And what's missing now is anything that would be the equivalent to that for these public sector workers. I mean, here's a target. I mean, I just went to this demonstration on, hands-off demonstration that took place. I was asking myself, why aren't we in front of every Tesla dealership in the country? I mean, this guy is a target. Musk is a target. He's the layoff machine. He's the person that we could dramatize, maybe not 400,000 people on the mall, but something to show that we're in solidarity with these workers. Instead, it was hitting at the strongest part of the opposition, which is Trump still has a large cohort of support. Musk doesn't have any depth of support. So it just strikes me as feeble. And I don't think there's an understanding yet between public sector and private sector unions that they need to get on the same page with some. I mean, they may be having talks, but I'm not privy to them, and I'm not reading about it, and I'm not seeing any action because the hands-off demonstration, in my opinion, was the wrong message, because that was a defense of the status quo, which gives the Trump people saying we're changing the status quo, we're changing, production so that it happens in the United States. We're using tariffs, all the crazy things that they're doing. We're laying off workers because they're not needed and it's wasting your tax dollars. So you have the liberal opposition defending the status quo. And the status quo for working people in the private sector isn't very good.
Absolutely. Yeah, we covered the hands-off protest, and to kind of yes and what you're saying. We spoke with a decent amount of people who a lot of them said, they wanted to see Democrats doing more of what Cory Booker did, a couple of weeks ago now, where he.
Tell me about what Cory Booker did. I have a problem with that one too. What did he do?
Yeah, I think the idea here is that, he did something, and the bar has been set so low. Mm-hmm.
I hear you. But what got me about that is it wasn't like Strom Thurmond trying to stop the civil rights legislation. Why didn't he do that to stop the appointment of Kennedy for Health and Human Services? I mean, God only knows what a disaster he's going to be. Why didn't he stop Hegseth becoming Department of Defense? Why didn't he stop something in the Senate as opposed to just going on a long distance cruise? And it's noble that he has the stamina to do it, but I don't know what he did.
It seems like what he did was set himself up to be in a good position to run in 2028. That's what actually that whole thing was about, to establish himself in that sense. And
do about as well as he did the last time. You're not going to be the nominee in 2028.
I'm sure. I'm certainly in agreement with you that there was no actual protest there, right? I think that he said something vague about he's going to stop the like daily activity, something to that effect of the government. But like you said, there was no actual legislation, no policy, no appointment that he was actually trying to stop, to get in the middle of.
If he
So
did that, maybe they could have strung somebody. If it was, let's say, stopping Hegseth or Kennedy, there could have been someone that followed him and slowed it down, and then followed him and slowed it down, and then all the Democrats could have taken a turn and shut the place down for a month. I mean,
sure.
it's not like there's any legislation the Democrats want that are going through there. It's all stuff they don't want. But anyway, it is what it is. I just the feeble. It's almost like everybody's internalized what Lane Kirkland did then, and is coming up with the least disruptive, demonstration. I'm glad that people think Booker did something and that it's a moral shot in the arm for him. He keeps quoting what's his name, the civil rights legislator who was in the freedom marches and got beat up. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's quoting somebody who's basically just about got killed in a demonstration for something, right? He was trying to get rid of Jim Crow. It was a monumental struggle. But what Cory Booker wasn't advocating the impeachment of Donald Trump. He wasn't advocating anything I could wrap my mind around it, other than, you got to stand up. Okay, good. I'm glad he stood up.
Yeah,
anyway, I don't mean to take us down a rabbit hole here, but the feebleness of the Democratic protest and individual protest is really unnerving, because it's not going to be a slam dunk to take the House of Representatives back. It will not be a slam dunk if it's perceived that the Democrats are only supporting the status quo. Now, if Trump keeps turning on and off these tariffs and creates such insecurity that we go into a recession, that could do the trick. But I'm worried about the feebleness of the response.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I do want to come back to the tariffs, because I think that's an important thing to talk about, in terms of working people. But I do also want to kind of address something as far as like the mass layoffs go. So for anyone who is listening to this and is still thinking about these layoffs in terms of making the government more lean and efficient and less wasteful, why are these layoffs probably not actually about efficiency? Can you also tell us what they might actually be more about for the Trump administration? Who actually wins here?
Okay, you have to go back to, really you have to go all the way back to the 1930s and 40s. So there was, there was a real conservative ideological reaction to the growth of government under the New Deal and then under World War II. And there were more than a few right-wing intellectuals, Milton Friedman's and others, who really wanted to, and then Goldwater, who really wanted to reduce the size of government. And then phrased by one of the Republican strategists says, I want to shrink government so it can get it down to the size so it can fit it in a bathtub and then drown it. So the idea is to destroy government. The point is that what the Trump folks really want is a big defense budget and virtually nothing else. They don't want to regulate the private sector. I mean, look where Trump comes from. He comes from a real estate business where regulation is things that they hate. They want to be free to do whatever they want, and they don't want to get tied up in the IRS. So they just as soon see the IRS disappear. Right. They just as soon have the private sector do all the research and development. They're not really into that idea that government is totally necessary for all research and development. It's just another form of regulation, and they're worried that they're going to have to pay for it, even though they found millions of ways not to pay for it. So the idea of having government small enough to fit it in the bathtub and drown it is, I think, what you see going on now. Uh, uh, Look, Musk doesn't want any regulation, right? Doesn't want regulations on his space yachts or environmental, when he pollutes 10 square miles every time he shoots up a rocket. He doesn't want any of that in the way. He doesn't want to be responsible for the debris that he's throwing into outer space, or, he doesn't want to have the NLRB tell him that he's got to deal more fairly with his own workers. He wants to keep it non-union. They don't want big government. They don't want any kind of government if they can help it. So the excuse is put it all in the states. Whatever you need, they'll do it. The state is more easily controlled by business interests. Federal government gets gets too much protection, although it's a lot of corporate capture goes on there. So I think I don't think that argument, we need more workers to have a better government, is going to sell, because the people who don't want any government don't want it to work. They would just as soon have them all those folks disappear.
Absolutely. And as far as the, on again, off again tariffs that have been sold to us anyway, as a way to kind of protect jobs in the US and bring back manufacturing jobs, that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick then went on to say are basically like robot jobs, not human jobs. Do you think these tariffs are at all effective at doing this, at protecting, existing jobs and giving us more high-paying, stable jobs like the ones that built the middle class that is essentially now extinct?
Well, I've been listening carefully to Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, and what his argument is pretty solid. First of all, he shows that the number of auto jobs that were lost and plants that were closed, robots or not, these plants don't run by themselves, and because of disastrous corporate-oriented free trade regime. So the idea of targeted tariffs is to protect employment and maybe enhance employment in particular industries, combined with a good NLRB and the PRO Act and other opportunities to allow labor to organize, would be a good thing. What they're doing now is it's hard to wrap your mind around what they're doing, because I think they don't know. The argument that these mass tariffs are going to bring back, every kind of employment. I mean, someone said, making plastic toys in the United States or sewing shirts in the United States is, okay, that could be done, but there's not a real comparative advantage there. But if you're going to make cars, if you're going to use cars, it'd be good to make them here. There are a lot of people that could benefit that employment. Are they going to bring us back to? I don't think I'm going to live long enough to see a golden age of manufacturing in the United States, but
I don't think I'm going to either.
The targeted tariffs, I think, would be useful. Here's a story that I like to tell, which I think is indicative of the problem. So, in September, it became clear that John Deere and Company were shifting 1,000 jobs to Mexico. And these are unionized jobs, okay? And they were doing massive stock buybacks. It was 12 billion, some high number, 8 to 12 billion. So they're paying, using this, again, this was unheard of before the 1980s, that the company would even dream of doing this. But now this is what smart managers are rewarded to do, because they get paid in stock as well. So they want to drive up the price of the stock manipulation. All right. So Trump, I think, smartly says, if you do that, I'm going to slap a 200% tariff on when you try to import the products you're making in Mexico back into the United States. Now that, I think, was a smart tariff. You're basically telling company, go ahead, you do that, and we're basically not going to let you throw jobs away and then bring back the same product that is going to make you more profit than you're making now. You're making plenty, and you're making a lot of money now. You don't need to make more for stock buybacks. So what do the Democrats do? They wheeled out Mark Cuban, or Cuban, I don't know which way you pronounce it. Pardon?
Mark Cuban, yeah.
Yeah, so former owner part owner now of the Dallas Mavericks, a billionaire. What does he say? He goes, this was wheeled out by the Democrats in the middle of the Harris campaign. He says the tariffs are insane. He said not one word about the 1,000 jobs. The Democrats said not one word about the 1,000 jobs. Instead of saying, they could have said two things. They could have either said, we support that because we want to save the jobs, or they could have had another way to save the jobs, which is saying, okay, if you're taking any federal money or getting a tax break, you can't do compulsory layoffs. You have to do, but they did neither. They basically took the free trade position. And so I think that in a nutshell shows how you could use tariffs in a productive way as basically a tactic to protect jobs, really protect jobs, and how the Democrats were bankrupt. And
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier that, the Democrats don't want to do these things because it kind of gives lie to who their actual constituents are. Their constituents are the billionaires and the donor class, or the billionaires that they're trying to win back.
I also think they're very fearful about being perceived as anti-business. So they've now basically, in their mentality, it's hands-off business decisions. Yes, if they pollute, yes, if they, hire, underage workers or, that kind of stuff, yeah, then we'll regulate them. But we're not going to regulate how they make their hiring and firing and their investment decisions. Otherwise, we're going to be perceived as anti-business. And that means, so the irony that's taking place now, the Republicans historically were exactly that, right? So you had the Democrats now adopting the historical, not wanting to be seen as anti-business. The Republicans now, you've got a train wreck as president who's willing to attack corporate interests. Whatever he feels like doing on a given day, he will do. And what's happened for the public at large, for workers at large, is there's nobody advocating other than Trump. There's nobody advocating protecting their jobs. I'm waiting for the Democrats to say, this is how we're going to protect jobs. This is how we're going to build a middle class life for people. This is how we're going to rebuild Appalachia, because coal industry isn't going to do it. How we're going to rebuild the Midwest. We are going to advocate the opposite of killing jobs in the public sector. We're going to advocate providing a job at a livable wage to anybody who needs it, so that you don't have to run away from your town, your little town in Western Pennsylvania, or Northeastern Ohio, or wherever. We're going to help make sure there are jobs so you can raise your family, have a decent standard of living, and so on. Where's that vision? It's just not there. It's just not there. It's not coming from either party. So what, by default, you're getting this blunderbuss, tariffs on everything and everyone, and turn it into a trade war with China, and corporations are just like still off the hook. Not their fault. They're laying off people every day. Every day that, as we're talking right now, there's probably another 1,000 workers that got laid off. No one's going to do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I guess I would wonder, so now Bernie has been doing his Fight the Oligarchy tour I think he started in February, around the time that we first spoke about mass layoffs and all of this stuff. Clearly it has hit with some portion of the population. People seem to be very receptive to this message right now. I don't see any other Democrats really doing this in any meaningful kind of way. You have Cory Booker grandstanding, and then you have Bernie and a few other people, I will say. Like, I know Ro Khanna has been at least, on tour. AOC has been with Bernie. So let's say a few people joining Bernie on these tours, talking to people around the country. What do you think about that? What does it say about where we're at right now, that there are so many people who do seem to be receptive to that message? And what lesson could Democrats, if they had any ability to actually learn from anything, or any desire to actually learn from any of this, what message should they take away from this?
Those are very, very good questions. Of course, I support what Bernie's doing, and I'm glad that he's doing it, because it's an educational opportunity. What's missing, however, is the follow-up. There's no organizational component. If you bring in 30,000 people together, I hope everybody's name was captured by somebody, and I hope there's someone's thinking about. I'm talking to some people who actually are thinking about how to build structures that follow Bernie around, because what we need, I think, is a independent political organization that actually has a positive vision, has a real crisp working class agenda, and is unafraid, isn't trying to merge itself within the Democratic Party. I'm thinking about almost like an association of independent working class politics of some sort, where you're outside the Democratic Party. You'll lend support to Democrats who actually support a working class agenda. The dozen or so that really do. Like the Sherrod Browns when he runs again, and of course Bernie. Even Bernie's been saying people should run as an independent. But to get from here to there, you need an organizational component. I don't think that can be created without some major labor unions deciding to build it. I don't think it can grow up, from the nonprofit, NGO community supported by, wealthy private donors and private foundations. I don't think there is there's a will to do stuff around other issues, but not, abortion, identity politics, et cetera. But I don't think there's a will to do it around working class politics. Not when you see where that money originally came from corporate side. It's not going to. So unions are the place to have this happen. I'm hoping my little contribution is I'm going to try to persuade them that this is what they have to do. Otherwise, they're on a suicide mission, because their members are running out from under them. I think amongst working class people right now, the Democratic label, even within a good trade, progressive trade unions, is toxic. They say, well, a majority of union members voted for Trump. Well, I voted for Harris. Okay, but like 45% voted for Trump. That number's not going to go down until you fill the vacuum. The Democrats have basically turned those people over to Trump. So how do you don't get them back by convincing them to become Democrats? And I don't think very many Democratic candidates are willing to, again, interfere with business decisions. I think they're willing to entice them, give them, big tax breaks to set up new plants, et cetera, but actually protect working people's jobs right now in the here and now. Try to stop compulsory layoffs. I don't think that they'll ever be there. Maybe a couple of them, but I don't. Look, I was at a conference with Bernie Sanders. I tried 4 times to engage him in a conversation about this. It kind of just blew me off. People are set in their ways, but Bernie senses, he knows the working class people are rebelling from the Democratic Party. So does Sherrod Brown. He said everywhere he went, he kept hearing NAFTA, 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 NAFTA. Well, you need a response to that. You're not going to get it from within the Democratic Party. You have to build something fresh, new, and it needs the UAW. It needs the Communication Workers of America. It needs other unions to say, okay, we are ready to build a new political entity. We're not going to be a spoiler. We don't have to be a spoiler anymore. 2/3 of the congressional districts are one-party districts. Many districts don't have any second candidate. So we can run independent candidates without threatening anybody. And give working people a real choice and a clear platform of what they need and want, which is not being articulated. I don't see a way out of this without a new political entity. I just don't see it. Otherwise, I think we're hanging on by our fingernails, election by election, to see which, watching the dialogue move further and further and further away, to the right.
I don't disagree with that. I have a few follow-ups. I guess to respond to what you just said. see without some kind of concerted effort to do something different, to break away from the status quo, to break away from, what we had under Biden or, whoever else. We are just going to swing back and forth between Republican and Democrat, and each administration just trying to undo what the other one did, and then nothing happens, nothing changes, nothing material changes, and we're just kind of stuck in that place while working people's lives get more and more miserable and unbearable. So I agree with you when you say like we need something else. I guess I would wonder. There have been efforts in the past to create a Labor Party or an independent party. Those efforts have all failed. Do you think that there's something fundamentally different about this moment that would allow us to move in that direction, to get enough support that we could actually build something better, something that actually delivers materially for working people?
Well, it's interesting. I definitely think something could be built right now. We're just finishing up with the Center for Working Class Politics and YouGov. We just are going to get the results of this large survey we designed for the Blue Wall states in Ohio. 3,000 respondents, costing us an arm and a leg, but we're testing out. We'll see what kind of policies people are for, and whether they would rather see those policies articulated by a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. So we're going to get more information as we go on. But I'm convinced that the door is wide open. I'm not so much worried about past failures. I was involved in Labor Party stuff. I think I could design and I'm hoping to write a book about this. I think I could design a process that would be have a better chance of success. But what's missing is I don't see unions right now having the bandwidth to build it, and that's what worries me. I don't think, like I said, like having a grassroots third-party movement, grow up without institutional foundation, I think is even a longer shot, and it'll be very difficult for that kind of formation to represent working people. I mean, the most mobilized, active working people are in unions or places that are trying to become a union. Those are the people that probably won't get that attracted to something that happens in a sort of NGO type gathering. I want to look more closely at Working Families Party. They're so tied, they're so close to the Democratic Party in perception that I don't know that they have a lot of working people in it. So my worry is the institutional agency. I think that's in terms of the moment being right, it's more right now than the 1990s when we were doing this. There was a working class disappointment with Clinton, but it's nothing like the disappointment now. I can track you, in Wall Street's War for Workers, my book, I can show you chart after chart to show the collapse of support for the Democratic Party. So compared to then, I mean, it's phenomenal. I'll just give you one example. Bill Clinton in 1996 got, in this one county in West Virginia, the county that had lost the most coal jobs over the next 30 years is Mingo County, West Virginia. Clinton got 70% of the vote, 70%. And every 4 years, as the coal jobs disappeared, the Democratic vote went down. Biden got 13%. Obama got 40%. Biden got 13%. Harris got 12%. I mean, that's alienating. This is it's a white county, but you can't blame this on, racism. But if Obama got 4 times as much as, or 3 times as much as Biden and Harris, there's something else at work here. There's just this profound alienation of the inability of the Democratic Party to really change the deteriorating economic condition that you described so well before. So I'm caught between here. You put your finger right on the problem. I think the opportunity is greater than any time in my lifetime. And the ability for unions who are besieged and struggling as it is to step out and build something new, I think is difficult right now. And I'm not sure entirely why it's so difficult. I don't know what uh, I don't know what Sean Fain, the UAW, would lose by doing something like this. I don't think they have a picture of what doing something like this is. I don't think they have, that's not where they come from. They come from a rank and file democracy background, and they gain power by, really fighting the good fight internally and getting rid of corruption and, taking on the boss. And Sean Fain talks in working class terms, unlike most labor leaders for a long time. It's really refreshing.
Yeah.
But he doesn't come from a political background of how, I don't know that he has a historical understanding of how third parties can influence the two-party system and change it, mold it in his direction. Look, it's a long shot, but sitting, I can't sit still and not describe the moment for what it is. It's a golden opportunity to do something different. Working class people are howling about how bad they feel about the Democrats. They're not in love with the Republicans. They may like, Trump as a disruptor, but they're not fools. They're not seeing their way of life getting any better, and there's nobody there for them. So mobilizing them around a very strong progressive populist economic message and giving them a institution to be part of and a direction which could follow up perfectly from the Bernie rallies that are taking place is something that could be done, but it takes resources, it takes commitment, it takes vision. And that part, the vision part, I think isn't there. And, I don't know what it's tough to do what I did. The last time around, the oil, chemical, and atomic workers, that Tony Mazzocchi was the officer of, was the base for building a labor party. So that allowed the rest of us to speak on behalf of the union and recruit other unions. We're missing the base right now. There's no one union that's of any size that's willing to, really say, okay, we're going to build this thing. They may say, the postal workers will say, we want an independent party, and the United Electrical Workers, are very small, are totally would love to see this happen, but they're not in a position to. Postal workers have their hands full now about possibly being privatized. The UE is small. No one's going to move until the auto workers move, and I don't know quite. I'm trying to get into their heads, but it's if something starts to happen, I really will start to think that writing actually is powerful.
I would like to think so.
I don't know that, I'm not convinced that it is. Sometimes I think I'm just, talking to people who already agree. And what I'm really trying to do is talk to the people who don't agree. But I'm going to get that from the left and from the right. I'm going to get it more from the left, actually, who think that this is foolhardy, that working with liberal Democrats is the only game in town, and that, maybe running some independents through Working Families Party is okay, but nothing too strenuous that would upset the apple cart. And I think the apple cart, Trump's proved that the apple cart, people want to upset the apple cart. Anyway.
I think that, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know who Tony Mazzocchi is, Les wrote a wonderful biography on him, and everyone should read it. It's a really great history of the labor movement. And for anyone who doesn't know Tony Mazzocchi, he was a very significant labor leader, and he is one of the people, along with Les, who popularized the term just transition. So if you're interested in labor history at all, you should really read that book. And to comment on, what you had said before about Sean Fain and the UAW starting a third party, an independent party for labor, for working people. I think that you hit on a really important reason why no one has done this. It's a lack of vision, and I don't want to say a lack of imagination, because I don't think that's it. There's plenty of imagination. It's just example lack of example, and living in a time where, most of our lifetimes have been characterized by a steady decline in the power of organized labor, in just the general well-being of working people's lives. So we haven't seen anything good really happen. I am, over my lifetime, this is the most active labor movement that I have ever experienced. And, things are looking up in a sense, but it's still very fragile, as you've said, and very weak, and not really in a position of power, hopefully yet. So I think that probably plays into this idea that, oh, you can't start a third party. That's ridiculous. And we've also lived through times where, a third party, people who are running as independents are blamed for, Republicans taking power, or whatever it's going to be. So I think that those things add up to, well, that's a lofty idea. It's not something that's actually actionable, and you have to start where you can make a difference. You do incremental changes and just kind of hope for the best. And we've wound up now in a place where those incremental changes that we are supposedly getting, those crumbs, they have amounted to a pile of slightly bigger crumbs and not much else.
Yeah. Well, I think this is what I would advocate in the short run. Labor people should ask their own members. Give them a simple question. What would you like to see? You want us to support Democrats, Republicans, or would you like to see a new independent party of working people? Just ask them that question. And I can tell you they don't want to ask that question because they know what the answer is going to be. And so my goal is to basically ask that question and show labor leaders the data that what they get, and encourage them to ask their own members, because I think that's the missing piece right now. Is having the dialogue. All I can do is encourage a dialogue. Let people raise all the issues about spoilers, et cetera, and then we can show them the data about. It used to be that the South was the one-party states. Now it's everywhere. One party, the gerrymandering has turned, almost 70% of the districts or something into districts where there's an average of 20% or more victory for one party or the other. You're not going to be a spoiler there. So we can raise all those issues, but it starts with talking to your own members, and for the left, it starts with asking the following question: how is it that Trump got elected not once but twice? And what does that say about our own political practice over the last 20 to 30 years? How did that happen?
Absolutely. And also, being willing to actually engage with the answer that you get for that question.
At least have the discussion. Let's see if let's have some critical analysis, because we've got to think that the path that we were on didn't work. However you define that path, it didn't work. You got this guy now. Okay, once you could say it was a fluke and Hillary was a bad candidate, but the left and progressive let Joe Biden run again. I was like one of the on his birthday, a year, in 2023, I was writing about, don't run, Joe, please, happy birthday, don't run. Where was the progressive community? They were totally in bed with Biden. Best thing since FDR. They had access to power. How could they not see that he could not possibly run again? It took that terrible debate for them to see what was obvious. If I could see it, I'm not some political genius, but I could certainly see that this guy was going to have tremendous difficulty. He's going to get clobbered by Trump. And then to wait to the point where you pick the candidate who instead of having a Darwinian type primary process, even if it was just a few, You pick the person that dropped out in 2020 before she made it to the first primary. So you picked someone who didn't have the street creds towards success. She may have done better. She did better than I expected she would do, but it was where was the left in all this? I don't remember hearing a hue and cry about step down Biden. There should have been protests about this if we really cared about keeping Trump out. Instead, I kept reading about how this guy was the greatest thing since sliced bread, best thing since FDR. Yes, I was told even by some of my comrades, no, you're wrong. You can't, you won't step down. You can't, I'm saying, no, we can force him to step down. No protest. Anyway, I hate to say this, but I actually have to run to another meeting in 3 minutes.
That is perfectly okay. We have talked about so much more than I had anticipated us actually talking about, so much more than just mass layoffs. This has been a really great rundown of this moment and an assessment of where we are and how we can move forward. I guess before you have to run, I would ask if there's anything that you would like to direct people's attention to as far as your work, any initiatives that you think people should actually get involved with.
Well, the best place to stay in touch with me about all that is I do pretty much a weekly Substack. It's free. So
and it's great.
If you go to Les Leopold on thank you. So that's the best way because, I'll funnel everything I know about. And if you want more depth on this, is Wall Street's War on Workers. Right now, we work with the Amazonians United Workers, but we can tell you, buy the book on Amazon. It's like dirt cheap. It's like $6 or something. They're giving it away. And I think it provides a lot of background. So those two things is where I would channel people.
Excellent. So yes, everybody please follow Les's Substack, buy his book, and thank you so much for talking with us. And I'm sure that we will keep in touch throughout all of this and we'll talk again. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.